Hey everybody, this is Dr. Sierra and I was going to teach you guys how to make beef bone broth. Bone broth has many health benefits, and if you're at the workshop today, then I've already discussed them, and if you're not, then you can check out my Facebook page or you can check out my other YouTube video on this. But beef bone broth is super easy to make. One of the reasons why I like to make bone broth is because it's kind of like at the end of the week, you might have all those leftover vegetables, you only used half an onion, you might have a couple carrot sticks left, and you can use that to make bone broth. So the first thing you need is you either need a crock pot, which we have one of those bigger crock pots. You can do it in the Instapot. I will tell you that my preferred method is in the crock pot because it cooks it low and slow, which is more has more health benefits. The other thing, if you do it in the Instapot, you want to make sure you have the settings to low. So if you're not familiar with what an Instapot is, this is what it looks like. Basically, it is a new school pressure cooker. I know my dad always tells me how his mom cooked in the pressure cooker all the time. I never grew up using a pressure cooker, but that's a plug-in pressure cooker. But you still want to put it on low, and you need to cook it for 120 minutes. When you do it in the crock pot, you have to do it for 24 to 48 hours. So keep that in mind. If you're in a time crunch or you just don't want to wait for it to be made, you're definitely going to want to do it in the Instapot. You can do the same thing on the stove, but then again, you have to think you have to leave the stove on all day. So if you're not going to be home, that's not ideal. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to buy some organic grass-fed beef bones. If you live in my area, they have them at Earth Fare, they have them at Whole Foods. They also have them, you can order them from Richard's, you can order them online as well. But basically, we want to make sure you ask them if they have the marrow inside of them. So this is what an organic beef bone looks like. These have already been sectioned. These are most likely femur, and you can see that the marrow's inside. So you're going to need 2 pounds of those. They'll come in all different shapes and sizes. If you are at Whole Foods, you just ask at the butcher counter. If you go to Earth Fare, which is the closest store to my house, they have them in the freezer section. You can just pick them up yourself. But what you're going to do is you're going to put them on a cookie sheet, and you're going to bake them in the oven for 30 minutes at 400. So you want to roast them before you cook the make the bone broth. The reason behind that is because it brings out more of the natural flavors. Some people do roast it, some people don't roast it. Some of it's a personal preference, but I would definitely recommend roasting them. So you're going to get 2 pounds of those. You're going to do the oven 400 degrees for 30 minutes, and then you're going to let them cool back down. So I cooked these earlier and they're already cooled. So I'm just going to stick them in my pot. So I'm going to use the crock pot. Then what you're going to do is you're going to add some different vegetables to it. So again, this is the fridge cleaner portion. So this is 4 stalks of celery. For this recipe, you definitely want to buy everything organic. One of the main reasons is because everything is getting cooked down, you're getting all the nutrients out of it. You don't want to have any pesticides in there. So this is, I just roughly chopped 4 celery sticks. You'll add that in there. The crock pot's going to be really full, so just be mindful of that. If you have a small crock pot, you're going to have to modify the recipe. This is 2 onions chopped into quarters. I just chopped those up. And you're going to have 2 carrot sticks, same thing, chopped up. Thankfully, that's the end of the big ingredients, because as you can see, the crock pot's super full. Then the last couple things you're going to add, this is some thyme. You can add bay leaves, you can add parsley, you can add oregano. I have thyme on hand, so that's what I'm going to use today. And remember, you're straining this, so you don't have to be very conscious about how you chop it and whatnot. All of it's going to get strained because you're going to suck all the nutrients right out of that. 4 garlic cloves. That's really important. Garlic has many medicinal purposes, so you want to make sure you have garlic in there. And then the last thing in the bottom of this bowl is I have some peppercorns. Okay? So those are going to be your solid ingredients that you're going to add to the bone broth. And the last thing you're going to do is you're going to add a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar. So that's going to help bring out some of the nutrients and so forth. You want to make sure you get organic. I often buy Bragg's, but now Target sells their own brand of organic. You want to see all those floaters in there. That means that it's good. That's called the mother. But make sure that you're getting the organic kind of that. Then all you're going to do is you're going to fill the crock pot with water. So everyone's crock pot's a different size. Everyone is going to be adding a different amount of ingredients based on that size. You want to add filtered water. It should take about 8 to 16 cups. It's a very broad range, I know, but the reason why is because you're going to fill this up until everything is completely covered in water. The reason why is because basically over the next 24 hours, when the crock pot's on low, it's going to keep cooking down and cooking down. You'll keep adding more and more water until you reach 24 hours or longer. For us, I usually do it for 24 hours overnight, and then I let it sit. One of the things you'll notice once you do that is, and you're gonna add the water, is when you go to strain it, there could be solids on top. And that's some of the fat, the protective layer that's gonna be on top of the bone broth, and that's some of the fat that's coming off. That's fine, just skim that off the top. And then what I do is I just put it into some mason jars, and then I either stick it in the fridge if we're gonna eat it that week, or I will actually freeze it in the mason jars. If you're gonna freeze it in mason jars, don't fill them full because there has to be room for expansion. But if you buy a tray of mason jars, I buy the small ones because that's how it fits in the freezer better, but also I don't want a huge jar of it every time I thaw it. But when you buy the small mason jars, don't fill them all the way, screw the lid on, and then you can stick them back in that tray and just set them right in the freezer. It's a great way to store it. Again, if you're doing it in the Instapot, you're gonna do that for 120 minutes. And you're gonna do that on low, and then you're gonna release the pressure and let it cool. Obviously, you wanna let both of these cool before you put them into the mason jars or however you're gonna store them. So again, that's how you make bone broth. So just fill this up with water. You're gonna bring it to a boil in the crock pot if you can get it that high, and then you're gonna bring it down to low and cook it for 24 to 48 hours. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll see you again soon. Bye. Okay, I'm back. So now you've had it cooking for 24 to 36 hours, and you're gonna keep adding water so it stays the same volume, and then you're gonna let it cool. You're gonna need a couple tools in order to get it ready to be stored. So I always just get a handy dandy Target bag. Get a better one than I have though, because this has a hole in it. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna scoop out all the solids because you're gonna throw these away. All the nutrients from the solids are now inside the broth, and so you're just gonna discard these. So you're just gonna scoop these out and do it any which way you want. I just like to put them into a bag because it makes it a lot easier. Then what you're gonna do is you need a fine mesh strainer. You can use cheesecloth if you have that. This is a strainer I always use, and all I do is personal preference. I pour it with my husband's help because it's really heavy, but I pour it over this measuring cup, because then once I pour it in there, all I have to do is pour it then into my mason jars in order to store it. Just makes it easier for transportation and just so I don't make a huge mess. If you have a funnel, that works the same way. But basically now that you have this cooked down, what you're gonna do is you're gonna put it into glass jars. If you are ever heating anything, you wanna make sure it's in glass. We don't wanna heat in plastics. That causes toxicity, and plastics to leach into our foods. And then remember, don't fill it all the way full if you're gonna freeze it. So that's all you really need to do. One of the things you'll notice is when you refrigerate this or freeze it, there's gonna be a fat layer on top. You just can skim that fat layer off, or if you wanna have some extra fat, you can definitely just heat it up and it will go back, emulsify right back into the bone broth. I usually just skim it right off the top once it's in the fridge, and then we'll heat it up. You can drink it, you can use it for your own stocks, you can make soup with it. But you can also, usually what we do is we just kind of drink a half a cup or a cup full if we're not feeling well. And also this is gonna have all the gut healing properties that I just talked about. So again, this is how you make bone broth. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. Bye.